Hello, Ken Spriggs here with part one of the brand new Revell N1 Starfighter from the Mandalorian. I begin working on the engines of the kit because I want to work on the lighting and also some modifications on the actual kit parts in order to be able to light them. My one complaint about this kit, and it's a great kit, it's a fantastic kit, but my one complaint is that the engine parts were made in solid plastic and there are no clear parts for them that are designed for lighting, which I had the same issue with Revell and the Razor Crest, and the same basic idea. But other than that, it's a fantastic kit. It's really well designed. It's virtually seamless the way that they put the parts together. The plastic also is very dark gray, so it's nice and light blocking. So once I get the parts modified, it is pretty easy to light them without having to do a lot of painting with black or anything like that for the most part. So let's go ahead and take a look at the beginning of the engines. All right, so I'm working on creating some parts that I can light in the kit parts themselves. So the part that this goes into is just solid plastic, but there should be light glowing around it to show that the engines are firing. Also, the main engine thruster underneath the back of the ship also is solid plastic, and I want to be able to light that up. So what I did was I started with some initial two-part rubber putty. It doesn't get as much detail as some of the other ones, but I wanted to test it. So I molded the part, and that's what this goes on to. You can see how the two knobs measure up, but it's the reverse. And I ended up making this piece here. Excuse me. There's the two holes. So what would happen then is this would go into there, and then it would have a clear part to light up around this. And I just painted that black. I did a bit of a test on it. It does work the way I want it to. Just want to get a little better detail. And this is the mold for the bottom engine. It didn't get as much detail. That's why this putty isn't the best necessarily. So after I tested it, what I did was I went ahead and used some better two-part mold maker. So you mix the two parts together. It actually sets up in like a half an hour, and then you let it sit to fully cure, and it's going to get better detail. So I made a little box around. Here's the original part this piece goes on to, and I only had to do like the top of it. I didn't need the entire piece to be covered in the rubber, and I'll show you in a minute what I mean. And then this box here has the entire nozzle part of the engine. So let me get those out of there, and I'll show you how the mold is gonna work. All right, here you go. So this will give you a better idea. So for this rear engine nozzle underneath the ship, they made it one solid plastic piece, but that part in the middle I want to be able to light up, and it's hollow, of course. So what I did was I made a mold of the part. You can see the detail down in there, nicely done. And so what I'll do now is I will use my Dremel to cut out the entire nozzle on the inside of this, so it's completely opened up. Then I'll put this back inside the mold, and I will pour clear resin down into that part there. And what it'll do is, because this is surrounded by the mold, it will then take on the characteristics of this missing piece that I cut out. And once I let it harden, pull it out, that'll be clear, and I'll be able to light it from the inside. And then the same thing with this piece here. So this part here is the back of the engines, and the two sides are the same, and these two parts are the same. So you can see these two little pins, they fit down in like this. But the problem is there should be light coming out around this part from the inside. So I did the same situation. did a mold of the inside, or this part here, right there. So again, and I put some marks on it so I can line up this piece again with the marks right there. So I can line it up. And then of course these two holes will go over top of these little two bits sticking up. Before I do that, of course, they won't go through those holes, because what I'll do is I will cut this entire circle out of here, and then same thing, put it back in the mold from the inside. It'll pour the resin into it and it'll be clear, just like this piece right here. Of course, it'll be attached onto the kit part. So that way I can put light through that and paint the rest of it and light block it, and just have the light coming out of this part here and spilling out around the engine part right here. All right, so I think that's going to work great. So the next thing I need to do is cut out this and all of this, and then I'll be ready to go ahead and put them back in the molds and pour some of the clear resin into it. All right, so I took the parts and I cut out the parts that I want to, the sections that I want to be clear. So I drilled this out, kept the rest of the outer part intact, and I'll be able to pour the resin from the inside once it goes back into the mold. Again, here's the mold. So it has other detail on it, but I'm not going to need any of that. Only that little part at the end there is the only part that I need. So what I'll do then is this piece will go back inside the mold. So you can see that detail down inside there. So what I'll do is I'll mix up the resin, clear resin, and I'll just dribble some down into that main section. It can be a little thicker. It doesn't have to be the same thickness as the original part. It just has to be clear. And plus with that detail there, I'll be able to dry brush some of the metallic over the detail to make it show up over the part that's lit. And then this part, I cut out the whole top of it actually, and even some of this thicker edge, so that in the end I'll not only have the back piece that's clear, but the edge around the part that goes onto the engine, so it'll be a little bit brighter glow through it. And I put 2 marks on this because they have to be lined up with those 2 pins, and they'll just put like a dimple into the part, just like I did on this one here. There was originally a dimple, and then I drilled through it to make the 2 pin holes so I can line up the back piece correctly, the part with the little spike on the end. All right, and then likewise this will go in, and I will line up the marks. You see here. Nope. Like this. There you go. All right, the same thing. So when I pour the clear resin into this, and again, it can be thicker. It doesn't have to be too thin. So, all right, so let me go ahead and get that resin poured in. We'll let that set up in a day, and then I'll be ready to have these parts ready for lighting. All right, and here are the completed parts that I modified to have some clear lightable sections. We'll start with the lower engine nozzle. So you can see there that that is clear now, the part that I want to light. But it has the detail from the part, which is really nice. Did a good job picking that up. So what I'll do is I'll mask this off, paint the whole part metallic, and then I'll just take some very light dry brushing of metallic to bring out that detail. And then I'll have a blue SMD inside to light that engine part when I put that together. So I'll maintain the part detail, but also be able to light it. And then here are my two parts to the rear of the engines that this spire, or whatever you want to call it, goes into. And you can see the little connector pin holes that I drilled through. The second one came out a little clearer, less bubbles than the first one, but either way it doesn't matter. They're both going to work just fine because you're only going to light the outer edge. You're not going to see the whole inner part of it. So I'm also going to be using these flexible filaments, blue, 300 millimeter from Brickstuff. Really like this company. They have a lot of good different flexible filaments, rigid filaments. And these are 3 volts. So these will all be lit up by a battery. So I have one hooked up here. Let me just turn it on and show you. It's definitely going to wash out the camera, but it's really bright, fairly even blue color. In real life, you can see the tiny little SMDs all through it, but you're not going to see that when it's inside of here. So let me kind of put this together and show you what that's going to look like. All right, so it's just kind of mocked up. I just kind of stuffed it in there, but you can see how nicely the blue glows around that part there. And even from the side, you're going to get a nice glow coming through there. And obviously the rest of the blue in the background won't be there because it'll be concealed in the kit. But that's going to work really nicely to get a nice glow effect of the rear engines on the kit. All right. All right, so I'm starting to put together the different pieces of the engines. Quite a lot of parts, which is kind of cool. So you have this inner mechanism, which I glued together. You have these pipes on here, there's 5 pipes, which are really cool. So this is all one mechanism that goes on the inside. Then you have the bottom and the top of the engine. This piece here, which actually came in 3 pieces as well. The front. And there's also a fan blade that goes there. And then the back piece, which I obviously made so it's able to be lit with the clear part. All right, so none of these are glued together yet except for the little components. So let me show you. Try to hold this together. Get in there. Okay. There's that fan blade in there. I still have to modify the front of this because I want a little bit of light to be sticking through. Looking at the stills from the show, or the images from the show, this entire front is not glowing blue. There's actually a couple little parts glowing through that are blue. Same thing with all this part here. Oops. Hold on a second, let me put that together. All right, so you can see there's plenty of room in there for me to put the lights in. Since I'm not really lighting the entire thing, just the outer edge of it, I don't have to worry about that, that other part that's inside of there. And what I could actually do is this piece and this piece, I can do as separate assemblies, put the lights in them, and even paint them, put the lights into them, and then put them onto the front and the back, including that little fan part. and then work out the lights in there as well. Probably also have this entire part obviously painted, weathered before I put it on the inside, but I might have to paint these also just because it's just, there's so many openings in this, I can't really be masking it off and trying to paint it. So, all right, but definitely making some progress here in these engines. All right, so I'm playing with a couple of ideas. I think I've kind of honed in how I want to go about lighting this whole engine. And I think that I can manage to do it with just one of these flexible filaments because they're so long. It's a pretty long filament. So what I did was I took, first of all, I took one of the engine parts and I put some holes through. The bigger one there is to accommodate the filament coming through. The smaller one is just to have the wiring lead, focus, going back into the engine part. And then the filament itself is going to go through the center engine part. So this one here, I cut out that whole part right there. And I also drilled a hole up at the top. Let me show you. So that whole part is opened. And then I have a hole right there. So the idea is that part of the filament is going to be lighting the back, obviously, to light the back engine. Part of the filament is going to be wrapped around this part in the front, which is going to help to light the fan blade up at the front. And I've started to modify that as well to show you how that's going to work. So I noticed that these openings already in the kit part tend to let a little bit of light bleed through for the fan blade. So all I did was I took my Dremel cutting blade and I opened that up just a little bit more to accommodate some light coming through. And so what it does is you just get a little bit of light coming through in like 4 different sections of the fan blade, which is all that I want anyway. The few shots that I was able to get in the show just show that. There's just a little bit of light leak coming through. And the idea, of course, in this whole thing is that this was a really beat up, stripped down ship originally. All it really had was the main body, which was still mostly yellow from the original Naboo fighter. And a lot of parts were missing, so they mixed and matched a lot of parts to build this ship. And there's a lot of missing panels. So the exposed areas on the ship are not supposed to be there. They're just panels that they never replaced because they didn't necessarily need them. Same with the engines. The engines are supposed to be completely covered, completely smooth. There isn't supposed to be any big open panels like this. But again, it's the idea, and you can even see the connecting little points there where they would put a plate on this and rivet it in place or whatever. So that's why you're going to see, you shouldn't be able to see the exposed engine inside like this. And you shouldn't have any other exposed areas. And then in the end, I'll have the 2 leads coming down from the black and the red. And they will then meet up with, I'm probably going to have to use some magnet wire because it has to go through this wing part. And this one sandwiches, obviously, sandwiched in between the top of the wing part that's integral to the body. So there's really not any leeway between them. So I'm probably going to have to put a slight groove into it to accommodate some magnet wire to go through into the kit in order to power everything. I didn't want to use magnet wire at this point on those. It's just a little more flimsy and harder to use. So these will work fine as far as getting it through the engine. And then I'll solder them onto some magnet wire in the center of the engine in order to take it out through here. And there's actually a little space right there. So right about here, probably I'll channel a little teeny groove for the magnet wire. Once I get that together and everything inside, I'll just run that wire out and then that'll light the entire engine. So I think that's going to work just fine. And I'll show you a little more what I mean when I get the these parts going together. Once I get it all hashed out, I'm going to take the filament back out, and I'm going to paint everything, of course, and then I can put the lighting into it, and then I can start getting it assembled and putting it together, and then going from there. The idea here is that I'm going to have to get the entire engine painted, the inside, the outside, before I put anything together for the kit, because the top of this wing is integral to the whole body. But I'm not going to paint the wing. I'm not going to paint any of those parts. What I'll do is get the entire engine wired together, lit, painted, and then I can attach this onto the main part of the kit, and I can mask this off when I want to paint the rest of the kit. And you'll see a little bit more whenever I start getting that together. But the nice thing about the flexible filament is I can then just wrap it around this part, so I can take it out of the hole. I can wrap it around the outer edge of this, glue it in place, run the wiring back down through, so I can meet it up in the center with the magnet wire. And on the top of it, the same situation. So it comes out of this hole. I can just wrap it around the perimeter of this part on the edge, glue it in place, and then that will light this part here. And I'm going to have to fashion a little bit of a cover around the back of this, pretty much like around this edge here, to prevent the light from glowing back. You're going to see some of it, but I don't want it to be that glaringly bright. But yeah, I think that's going to work out well. Let me go ahead and keep working on that, and then we'll start getting these engines together. All right, to kind of give you a better idea of what I'm talking about. So there's the inner engine inside the outer engine part. I have, it's hard to see with my thumb in the way, but I have the filament coming back out through this big hole. It's wrapping around this part, and it'll be glued in place around the edge of it. And then the wire will go back down through the smaller hole, and it'll come out through the middle, so I can put it up to the magnet wire. And likewise, this top one. Now, a lot of this, because it's so long, I'm not going to need all of this, obviously, to wrap around that rounded part there. So what I'll do is, once I get everything painted, I'll put that around it, glue it in place, and then feed the extra back down inside of this middle part. And a lot of that is either going to be housed inside of there, or it's going to be in this part right here. None of that's going to be visible, because that bottom cover is going to cover up all of that. So I can have a lot of the filament inside of this section, the extra, because I only really need it going around once. I mean, I can wrap it around this twice, I suppose, give it more light. That would be fine too. But I have a lot of room in there in order to feed the filament and get it to just where I need it to be, so I can light the front and the back. All right. All right, so I did one more modification for the painting. I'm getting ready to paint now. Because I'm putting that light flexible filament around this top to light these parts here, I didn't want that to be visible from the openings in the engines. So what I did was I measured out some styrene sheet to be a round part, and I also used some styrene rod, as you can see, on the inside. And I created these little parts that would block that. So let me go ahead and put this into the kit part, and I'll show you what that's going to look like. So here it is in half of it, and you can see how that's going to block that part in the front. so the light will not come back from that blue and you know, be obvious, and you're going to see it. So let me go ahead and I'll put this on here too. I had to do a lot of sanding, and my philosophy is to sand little bits at a time. You can always take more off, but you can't put it back on. So, all right, there you go. So that's now going to be blocking that. And once I get these painted, I'll be sure to glue on the inside of this and light block it, so you're not getting any of that coming back into the rest of the engine, where it would be obviously very visible right there. All right, so that's going to work out really well, and it looks like just part of the engine. I put a little bit of stripping on 4 parts of it as well to give it a little bit of detail. This part here, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, spins in the engines. It's spinning around, which is kind of strange because it's got hoses attached to it. I believe it does. I'll have to go and look at that again. All right. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and get these inner parts painted. And I'm going to start with a this Vallejo natural steel, because it's darker. It's not model air, so I have to thin it down quite a bit for it to flow through the airbrush. But let me go ahead and get those painted, and then I'm going to do some weathering, of course, on them, and some other little metallic details and the hoses and things like that. All right, so work's coming along really well in the engines and the interiors. I did a lot more modifications and scratch building. Go over most of the things. Like that little ridge plate there, I just glued on some styrene with ridges, painted it. I added more hoses, as you can see, here, right here, by drilling down into the part and then running the hoses, one right there. I painted the hoses, the other hoses. Oh, the ones I added are just my really thin black wiring, which is easy to do. I painted these with the rubber black, the hoses that are part of the kit. I painted this whole section with a hull red, and then went over it with a little bit of dry brushing of some red. And then I drilled some holes. I used some more of this black wiring. And I drilled 2 holes and looped it in there, and then painted them with some aluminum, which actually is accurate to the show. There are some kind of metal things there, or silver looking things there. I'm not sure what they are. Okay. On the back, I cut out this section, and I put a piece of ridge plastic in it, and it actually is translucent, so some of the blue will come through there. And then I drilled this out and put those 2 wires too. Lots of dust in there from the drilling. Okay, so I replicated both of them. And there it is inside the ship. So I'm doing some planning. So what I'm going to have to do is, before I put any of this in, I'm going to have to paint this inside. It's metallic, because you're going to be able to see part of that when the engine's in place. I also got these fronts, just the inside of them. And the color I used here and in here is natural steel. It's just a darker looking metal. I'm still going to weather these as well with some oils, because the inside of the engine is going to be dirtier and greasier looking than the outside. And the same with the inside of this. Of course, I got the fan blade painted too. This outside is going to be a chrome, a really shiny chrome. And I noticed in the stills that there's a little square on the side of this, and I'm guessing over here too. So I'm going to put that back on before I do any painting. And then I did a little bit of modification. I drilled some holes and put some extra rods in there. And I used a panel line scriber to put an extra line right here, because that one was missing. There might be one over here, but I'm not worrying about it. Not really going to see it. But I noticed in the stills as well, there's another panel line right here. And then one other thing, I drilled out all these little holes here because these are actually open. Right there. Obviously, this is where you would bolt on the panels that are missing. So I'm guessing that the plate going over top would have a bolt that goes through, and then, or yeah, underneath you'd put a nut on it and tighten it down, so that that would be secured. These are actually pretty accurate. Otherwise, studying the stills from the show and watching the scenes again, when they first introduce it, it's pretty accurate. Even the engine part is fairly accurate. I mean, there's certainly more things in here that could be added, but that's the beauty of it. You can really do what you want with this, and you can build it up quite a bit, which I did, and add a little more detail in it. But these are pretty much ready to go. Just want to go ahead and get some washes on them, and then I can start considering putting in the lighting. And I might have to, probably going to have to paint the outside, at least not including the wing, but the outside of this engine part before I put them together. Put everything in, because it's going to be hard to paint with the engine inside there. So, all right. All right, so quite a bit more painting, as you saw from the stills. So what I did initially was I painted the main frame of the engine with just aluminum, and I did chrome on these end caps, but there wasn't that much of a difference. They were both Vallejo. There wasn't that much of a difference, and I want there to be a difference. The key to this kit is that they took the bare bones ship, buffed off the paint, sanded it down, but also added newer parts and parts from different ships. So they're all different stages of either newer parts or shinier, duller, more pitted, that kind of thing. So I really wanted a distinction. So I went back and I put a coat of Alclad. So I did Alclad gloss black first, and then I went over it with first of all, some polished aluminum, and it wasn't quite as shiny as I wanted, so I went back over it a little bit more with some chrome. Turned out really nice. I really like that shininess on the front, because these are definitely one of the newer parts or the shinier parts on the ship that really stand out. And there's some other ones too that we'll talk about later. So I got those to where I wanted them to be, and I still have the inside looking darker and dirtier, which is what I wanted. Then I went back, and the aluminum was still a little new looking on the engine part. So I took some oily steel from Vallejo, and I just misted it over top of it. So if you look closer, you can see that looks pretty worn and dirtier. Definitely doesn't look new. And there's also a lot of weathering with some oils I did in there, which made that look darker in the engine part too. I also went back and I used some oils on these parts here and the ones on the back to bring out some of that detail and make it look like they're machine parts and they're in use on this kit. All right, so I really like that look, and I like the shiny chrome on the front and the dull looking color on the back. Okay, let me take that off and I'll show you the how I oiled up the engine, or weathered up the engine with some oil. All right, there you go. So I used some different oils from Abteilung. I used Starship Filth, engine grease, and some red rust. And I just went in and I really dirtied up the engine to give it that really used look. Take down the shininess of the metal. So I think that makes it look a lot better. All right. So really happy with that. And then, as I said, I used some on this top part here. Some of these I may still go back and add a little bit of extra color. I might put some other paint in there and weather it. We'll see. But that's supposed to be machinery also, obviously, that's exposed. But I can get to this after I put it together. I just wanted to get everything all done because in order to do the lighting and then get this sealed up, that whole interior has to be done. The engine has to all be done, the engine interior, the lighting has to all be in there. And then I can go ahead and get this put together. And then that'll finish up the inside of the engines and most of the outside. Then I'll just be doing some further weathering. Did a little bit more oils up in some of these parts, like where the exhaust would be, or intakes, that kind of thing. So, okay. All right. And then I also painted the rear covers. And I did the same effect. I used the aluminum, and then I went over that with a light misting of the oily steel, just to make it look more used. These spires I glued together and sanded, and I started with just the aluminum, and I didn't do the speckled on these. I wanted to be a bit of a contrast, but I did go back in and I used some Alclad jet exhaust, and also pale burnt metal to kind of give it the burnt look at the bottom, and to darken that spire at the end, because that's supposed to be darker. All right. So let me pop this together and show you how this is going to look with all the different parts and all the different paints on there. All right, it's not glued together, but I'm just holding it together. So very, very cool. You can see the engine in there looking pretty dirty and greasy. The other engine parts sticking through. The very shiny chrome front of it in the scoop. The more weathered parts at the bottom too. The burnt sections of the engine exhaust. And that darkened spire. So very cool. All right. So now what I'm going to do is go ahead and work on getting the lights inside of these and getting them sealed up. And then I'll be ready to go ahead and be done with the engine parts for the time being. All right, so I'm working on the wiring for one of the engines. And let me go over a couple of things. So I'm using one flexible filament, as I showed previously. So the filament is soldered on both ends, one with the negative, one with the positive. Here's the red for the positive. Here's the black for the negative. And so what I did initially was I took it up through the inside of the engine, which I hollowed out. And I will mention that I have to, see if you can see it. You can see inside there is still the big sizable pin connector. I took a larger, full-size drill with a deep drill bit and put it down in there and drilled that out. So I'm going to have to do the same thing on this. So I recommend, if you're going to do this, clear all that out first. This will go together just fine without the pin connectors. And then so you have a nice open area to go through there to come out of the hole there at the top. And the hole's wider so it can accommodate the filament to come out and then go back in again for the lead to go in the back. So I'll show you here on the top. So you can see the filament there. It's just sort of wrapped around, and it goes back inside the same hole that it came out of. So I just bring out enough of it just to light that area in order to light the front. Just enough to get light right there. And then, as I showed earlier in the video, that whole rounded section there I built on myself separately. It was not part of the kit, to stop the light from bleeding backwards into the engine area that you're going to see exposed. And once I get these together, I can, sorry for the shakiness, I can also put some a little bit of glue around the edge of that and then light block it as well to keep any light coming through. But I might even just let a little bit leak through just because it looks like it would do that. So then what I ended up doing is I did a little test, and because that extra piece I built is styrene, light was leaking through and you could see it, since all I had was a coat of the metallic on it. So I went back and you can see some black and silver spots on that. I pulled that rubber part back off of it, and I first of all painted some flat black around it, and then I went back and painted some silver around it to give it some reflectability, and now it blocks the light a lot better, bleeding through that disc that I created. Let me kind of show you the rest of it. So as you can see, coming out of this area is the original filament that I stuck up through there, and then the red wire coming back down, because both wires have to come out through here in order to go into the main ship. And then what I did was I have some magnet wire, you can see right here, and I soldered it on. There's the two shrink tubes over top of it, and I channeled a groove into the wing. It goes all the way through, because this sandwiches between, well, the wire is sandwiched in between this bottom part of the wing and the top part of the wing, which is on the body. So that's why I use magnet wire, which is nice and thin, and it can be easily hidden into a little groove, so that's nice and flush. And at some point I'll probably end up gluing it down into the, I'll glue it down into the plastic, and then I'll just have these wires coming out through here, this one set of wires, which will go inside the ship. And then, because it's tricky the way you have to put this together, so I had to put that all in there first and wire it through. But I still have to have this part here, which is loose, wrapped around this rounded part back here. Let me take that back out. Sorry. Okay. Where's my, oh, in front of me. So it's got to be wrapped around this section in the back in order to light the back engines. But obviously these have to be together for that to happen. So initially I had drilled some holes in the side, and that was able to do kind of what I wanted. But then I realized, why am I wasting so much time doing that? So I just went back and I cut a nice big old hole into the bottom. So everything can be done at the bottom. All of this can be wired in the bottom, ready to go. This will be sticking out through those holes. All of this wiring will tuck down in this section here, and the magnet wire will be attached and coming out. So that then what I can do is put this onto the top, glue them together, and this whole piece will be loose, so all I have to do is just wrap it around maybe a couple of times, maybe tack it down with some 5-minute epoxy so that it's wrapped around. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because it's putting a lot of light in that back area, and you're not really going to see it. All you're going to see is the light glowing out of the back. All right, so that's the basic idea. A little bit of extra modification, of course, that I had to do. I had to work out how that's all going to work, obviously, as I just explained. But I think it's going to work fine, and I'll be able to have the light shining in correctly. A couple of light leaks, which is fine. I'm going to leave them. Where I drilled some holes out for these extra tubes, there's a little bit of blue glowing through there, which is fine. One other thing that I had to do, which I didn't realize until I put it together, is I was getting a lot of light coming in onto the engine from the front, and I didn't know why. And I realized that, so in this kit you can see, this side here, because this side is missing the entire top section, it's all just round. And it's a round, nice connection with that disc that I built. This one, though, because it does have the other part on it, has this whole open area right here. So what I did was I took some epoxy sculpt and I molded it down into that area to fill in. This whole gap went all the way up to here. And so the light was coming generously right through there into the ship, and it was quite obvious. So now that I put that in there, now I have this flat section just like the other one is, and so that filled in that leak and prevented that from being a problem. But other than that, I'm ready to go ahead and get this all fished in together and then get this glued together and finish the one engine. Some of this will be tucked in here too, which some of the light is going to glow into that little piece of styrene, and you're going to see it up here in these little grooves too. You get just a little bit of light coming through, but that's basically the only light that you're going to see. Primarily you're going to see it in the back and the front, and just little bits in the other section. So okay, all right, so I'm doing some final fitting and taking a look and just considering all the different aspects of how this has to go together. And I realized that there are some other issues where the wing attaches onto the engine part. That's going to cause me to have to change the way I connect this. And none of this is a criticism. This kit is really well designed. It's really, really nicely put together so that virtually no seams are needing to be filled. But there's a lot of pins, a lot of pin connectors, which is good too, because it makes it a nice supported kit. But what I realized was when you attach the wings together, so this is the bottom of the wing, that's part of the bottom of the engine. The top of the wing is integral to the main frame, which is one big piece. Now the issue is that the outer part of the wings have some pins that click into the engines right there, as you can see. So this part clicks into there. That little rounded piece sticking down goes down into that little pin right there. So basically what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to attach the bottom section onto the wing itself with the wiring going through, and then glue this on top of the engine. So I'm going to have to attach the finished engines onto the main body before I glue the two halves of the engine together. Otherwise, there's no way that I'm going to get those pins inside of there and get that nice solid connection. But other than that, look at that. I mean, you can see the parts that are painted metal and the parts that are not, how they fit right into the wing. It looks perfectly natural. Perfect, you know, seam lines. It doesn't look like anything has to be seam filled or anything like that. The engine's going to go right on, and no need to fill in anything and hide it. So that's the route that I'm going to have to take. I didn't glue these on, they're just sat on there. So I was thinking, do I put this on there and then glue the bottom on? But no, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this whole section onto this piece and make sure that the wiring is sandwiched correctly and the groove is deep enough. And then once the bottom parts of the engines are attached onto this main body, then I can glue these onto the engines over top of the whole thing. So that's a route that I'm going to have to take. I was kind of hoping that these would be done as separate separate sub-assemblies, and then I can attach them on later once I finish doing work on this. But unfortunately, that's not going to work unless I leave the engines separated and put them on. So you definitely have to plan ahead and figure out how you're going to go about doing this. I think I'm going to go ahead and glue them on simply because the idea that I wanted to go with is that I'm going to just tape off the engine part, mask it off when I paint the rest of the body, the top and the bottom. But obviously I'll have to do the other things and put the cockpit in and all that stuff before I glue together the two halves of the body and start doing the rest of the painting on the body itself. So, okay. All right, so focus. All right, so I slowly wrapped the flexible filament around, and I used some super glue and some accelerant to tack it into place until I got it all around. Once I got it where I wanted it to be, I went ahead and used some 5-minute epoxy to really secure it in place. The battery's just taped inside here. It's not going to be inside the model. It's going to be outside, but just to keep it from flopping around, let me turn it on and show you how that's going to look. All right, so it definitely blows out the camera, but that's going to give me plenty of light. So now I can go ahead and glue on that outer cap. I'm not going to glue the spine part on just yet because I don't want it to be in the way, but I can glue that on, and then I'll show you the completed lighting. One more thing I wanted to show you. Let me turn off that light. The seam design is really, really good on this. You can see underneath that seam, so neither edge is affected by a seam. The seam is just underneath there. I did sand it down just a little bit, but I can re-groove out that that panel line, and it just looks natural, and it doesn't interfere with the way the wing looks at all. And I was able to get that wire through there no problem whatsoever. So, okay. All right, and there is the left completed engine. Now this end piece here isn't glued in place. The front cap isn't glued in place either. I still want to be able to get in there and do things if I need to. I don't have the right side on there yet, but I do have the left side glued and completed. Definitely looks really cool. I like the extra blue glowing through, and it looks more obvious on the camera than it does in real life. But let me kind of show you the different parts. So for now, I'm leaving that opening there unsealed. I'll kind of let it sit for a while. If I don't like it, I can always, that's why the cap is removable. I can take that off and seal that around. But I kind of like the idea of some of that blue glowing through. There's a few other little spots in there that you can see some blue peeking through some holes that I drilled in the part. So that's cool. You can see a little bit right there. And again, giving you the idea that it's not completely paneled correctly, and that's why some of the blue is looking through. You've got the backlight, which looks really sweet. Lots of nice glow coming through there. I'm thinking I might go back, and that top section is different than the other parts. I might put some scorching on that as well. I'm not sure if they're supposed to be engineered, but I believe it is. But that part's different than all the other sides. And then you've got the front. It's pretty cool. And it's patchy, which is what I wanted. I didn't want a complete glow behind the blades. I just wanted a little bit because this ship is kind of patchworked together, but very, very cool. All right, so really happy with how that turned out. Really happy with the different metallics that I've used on it so far. And then of course I'll repeat a lot of those things on the rest of the ship once I get it going. All right, so that's going to wrap up this part of the build. Just a little bit more on the right engine to get that attached on, and then the engines will be complete. So next I'll probably start working on the cockpit, because that has to be completed, and inside of the kit, that in the little sections that have some machinery behind the openings and the panels in the body, those have to be done before I can put the bottom onto the ship itself. And other than that, then it's just a matter of painting the rest of the ship and the other parts that are added onto it as well. So fantastic kit. Really happy with how this is turning out. So I will see you in the next video.